to this episode of Cali and Craig Talk. I'm Cali,
And I'm Craig.
and today we
Yeah,
we have the professor here.
we do. I always like when the professor's here.
Of course. Hello, professor.
Oh, thanks for having me on again. I always love joining you guys on this.
Yeah, and for any first-time listeners, the professor is John Robin, who is Craig's husband, senior editor at the publishing house and co-owner, and all-around awesome guy. But before we get started, we have super hot white chocolate that is
Hmm.
actually white hot right now
Yes.
and almost undrinkable. But I really do like the way it tasted, aside from
I
burning
know,
my
very
mouth on
good.
it.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
it might be my first time having white hot chocolate, and it won't be my last time.
Mm-hmm. John, you like it or is it still
Yeah,
too
mine
hot?
has just become drinkable. I've been sipping on it, but it still is really hot. So
Yeah.
I think all the marshmallows have pretty much turned into liquid. So
Yeah, my marshmallows, I think, were insulating it. So, like, I thought that it was okay because the marshmallows seemed like they were like, room temperature. And then, like, the little bit of liquids got out, and then I burned my mouth a couple of times. So, but yeah, I really like it better, I think, than the milk hot chocolate. Because, Craig, you drink milk hot chocolate, like, I don't want to say every day, but a lot.
It's quite a bit. And
Yeah.
admittedly, that's like the powdered stuff from a container, whereas this is like made with white chocolate chips.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a bit of a quality difference as well, but
Yeah.
I really like this.
Well, this turned out okay
Mhm.
because we were supposed to make, John, I don't know if Craig told you, the recipe was supposed to take 3 hours in the crock pot.
did.
So then we were like, oh no, I don't really want to be drinking hot chocolate at 11 o'clock at night. Um, so Craig, the king of trust the process, says, let's just make our own process. But it actually turned out because I think it's pretty freaking good. Now, if
Yeah.
we end up with stomach aches later, then we'll know that it was supposed to cook for 3 hours for a reason, I guess. Well, there really couldn't be a reason though, right?
No, 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 no. And I have made regular hot chocolate on the stove with milk like
Hmm.
this. So
Okay.
it's just changing what's in it.
But did it have the creamer? Like, because this
I
has
think
heavy
it,
whipping cream in it, mine.
yeah, I don't remember if it had heavy whipping cream or just milk, but I do know it was dairy.
Mm,
And I made it on the stove.
okay, it's
Part of
dairy.
me is curious what that 3 hour crock pot hot chocolate is like,
Well,
though.
I still want to try
I
it. So
want to
I don't
know. Yeah.
I don't know if Craig still has enough stuff, but if you have enough stuff, then when we're making the cookies on Saturday, maybe we'll make that. Oh no, wait. We have so many cooking recipes coming up this weekend, John. I
Hmm.
don't even know. Like, we're making these cookies. Craig, what are those cookies called that we're making?
Spicy frostbite chocolate chip cookies.
Yes. And then last weekend, did we post those from the podcast? We did, right? The chocolate chip cookies. We posted those that
I
we
think
made.
so.
I
I
feel
think
like
so.
we posted cookies. Yeah, we've been baking up a cookie storm. So this weekend is a Craig recipe, and then that's on Saturday. And then Sunday, we have a Cali recipe, which is a pot roast in the crock pot. But so the crock pot would be free on Saturday if we decide to be so brave. But God, that's a lot of projects for us to juggle at one time.
If we want to put it off a bit, if we're doing our Boxing Day write-a-thon,
We
that would be a
are.
good day to have a 3 hour hot chocolate.
Oh, you know what? We could. And then we could toy with the notion of adding rum to it.
There we go. Yep.
Okay, you got me in on this one. Now I already know what writing project I'm working on for.
Yay.
Now I
Yeah.
know what I'm drinking. That's even better.
Yeah. Now this time we have to make sure Craig doesn't get sick before then because Craig was
Right.
so
Yeah.
sick last time. So it was just John and me writing for like hours and then you were like falling asleep and coming back on and falling asleep. But I tell you, that's like really, it's such a fun thing because it's quiet and then like you just
Mhm.
check in every once in a while, but it's just like it feels so much better because you're on screen and you know that you're not going to get diverted and you're not going to go on Instagram and you're not going to get distracted. You're just going to focus. So, really is one of my favorite things that we get to do. But it will be better this year if you're not sick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope not, because I was sick last year with a flu or something, and I think the year before was COVID. So I've been sick 2 Christmases in a row.
Yeah, you better not get sick this year.
We both had COVID 2 years. Like that was we both had, and I
At
remember.
Christmas?
Yeah.
Yeah, two Christmases ago. Last Christmas wasn't COVID, but it was a really nasty flu. Like we
Yeah,
both sick. I got over it a bit before him,
you
so
did.
he
Yeah.
was sick on Boxing Day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sometimes it works like that. I usually get it first, and then
Mm-hmm.
delayed in showing symptoms. So I get symptoms and I'm over it in,
Yeah.
or maybe less, whatever. But then he'll usually be later. But I'm pretty sure we both catch it at the same time. He just is
Yeah.
lower.
Yeah, because it took, because now I'm remembering it a little bit better and I don't want to like, go back over it because I was super mad because somebody got
Mhm.
my best friend sick at Christmas time. So I was very upset. But remember it was like, it's exactly like you said. It was like a week or like almost like 7, 8 days before he was like showing
Yeah,
symptoms that you were sick because
yeah.
then you ended up going away on retreat, remember?
And
Or you,
I was
and then
fine.
I was quote taking care of Craig,
Mhm.
across country lines, not really taking care of him, but you know what I mean? And then you came back and he was still sick.
Yeah.
So it was like, yeah, that's funny that you don't get it at the same time. But it also works out because then you can take care of each other better. Because if you're both sick,
Yeah.
then
We're both down. That's
So, John, do I really take care of you when you're sick? I don't think I do.
not really, but you do handle, you know what, there are certain logistic things that, like, when I'm sick, it's really just like, okay, where's the cold med? I need this dose, I need this, I need to know I have all the stuff so that I can
yeah,
get myself through it. And
yeah,
so I do like that Craig can kind of just be the calm voice of reason,
yeah.
and I can know that I have everything I need to, shelter in. I tend to
Hmm.
just, yeah, lay low and take it easy. Actually, aside from some of the nasty throat and coughing symptoms, like, I kind of
Hmm.
like being sick when it happens because it's just, I drop right down and I'm usually like cozy in bed reading, or
Yeah.
I could play. Sometimes I practice the piano when I'm sick. That's just like excuse to stay in and not go anywhere.
Yeah, it just gives you an excuse to slow down, like
Yeah,
for once. Yeah. Your body just shuts down and you're like, okay, fine, I guess I'll stop. I do that sometimes. Like if my body just completely shuts down, then I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not doing anything today. I'm staying in bed. So, and I agree with you. Sometimes those are the best times because you really can't fight it. And then you get that like good sick sleep. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Mhm.
Like that,
Oh,
like
yeah.
you're just
Like,
totally knocked out. You feel like you've been sleeping for hours, really been like two
oh yeah.
hours. Man, those are good naps. Those like drooly naps. Yeah, those are good ones.
So I
And
did find out
uh
that I can trigger those naps by going, this is going to sound really weird at first. Just roll with it. If I go to bed soaking wet, I have that same kind of sleep. So there was one night when John's hot water bottle was leaking, and so he put it between us, not
uh-huh.
knowing that it was leaking onto me the
Oh
whole
my
night.
God.
And so, like, when I woke up, I was soaking wet, but I had the best sleep I've ever had. Like the same type of sleep you get when you're deadly sick.
Yeah. Oh wow. Well, I don't think you should try to recreate
So
that.
this is why you really want me to have two hot water bottles.
Yes,
There's double chance
more
one
chance of leak.
works.
That has more chance of leakage. He told me the other day about the two water bottles. I didn't know that. I didn't know that you used
Got
two.
four.
Yeah,
I
that's a
Yeah.
lot of water bottles.
I just, I find it just the muscles of the lower back or whatever, mid
Yeah,
back, just,
yeah,
especially both Craig and I, we're sitting all day. We're doing a lot of
absolutely.
stuff. So like when you're lying in bed, if you can lie on, like, let those muscles get nice and hot, like that's the
Yeah.
way
But
to.
I told Craig that the only thing I'm nervous about because I don't think it's a okay, first of all, if I'm wrong, somebody please correct me. But I didn't know that hot water bottles were a thing until I became friends with Craig last year and he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm getting my hot water bottle." I'm like, "You like drinking from a bottle?" Like, okay. Like I had no idea what it was. And then he showed me and he was telling me like how long it stayed hot. So I bought one. My husband bought me a really cute little pink one. It has a little pink sweater on it. It's adorable. But it's one of the best things ever. Like, because it stays hot for so long. But my problem is because I didn't use it my whole life, I'm not very comfortable with it. So like you guys lay on it and I'm afraid it's gonna like explode or something.
Yeah, I've had, as you know, one explode once, but that was an older water
Yes, I
bottle
was in Zoom with you. It was
yeah,
terrifying.
that
Oh,
had it had like a weak spot in it, but
Yeah.
normally it doesn't. Like I wouldn't sit on it, put my whole weight on it, but
Yeah, but you would lay, but you put it under your neck and you fall
I do.
asleep. Like you leave
Yeah.
it there, right? Yeah. I'm like so afraid. I don't know. And so then I end up hurting my neck more because I'm like,
Yeah.
like, tensed up on it, which is, counter what the project is not supposed to be for that. But I do like it because I can move it all around. And
Mhm.
I tried what you did the other day, so I cuddled up with it. Like I was
Mhm.
holding on to it. That was nice. But there was still the fear of like, oh my God, if this explodes, I'm gonna have like third-degree burns all over my body or something. But it at least only one exploded. And yeah, that was under your foot, right? You stepped on
Yeah,
it
it
wrong or
was.
something.
I had it
When we were
resting
sitting
on
there.
top of my foot,
That's what it
and
was.
I guess I moved it, and that was the final break in the weak spot, and it just whooshed all over my foot.
Yeah. I like your Starbucks mugs that you guys have.
Yeah, so John's uncle would get us giant Starbucks mugs every year, so this is one of them.
Yeah, well, we'll show those off in the picture with the hot chocolate when we post the podcast. So anyway, Professor, since it is the end of the year, well, pretty much the end of the year, I have been talking to a few people who are just starting to get into the game of writing, and they're super excited. I don't know if you're muted, John. I'm not really sure because I can't hear you. Um, no.
Okay.
There you go. Now I can hear you.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
thing, but I think Craig is muted.
yeah.
I was muted because I was putting my mug in the
Oh,
sink, so because Shiger here is harassing me to lick it out, and he's had enough dairy for one day.
hopefully whatever that issue was, it's gone because I
Okay.
I didn't do anything. I just started talking and you said I'm okay. So
I think
Yeah, it
your
was a
computer just decided you weren't saying anything important enough.
you
this
weren't
whole
ready.
episode will be you're talking to a ghost and just
Mhm.
pretending that he's actually answering you.
My favorite kind of guest. I can just pretend you're agreeing with everything that we say.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm almost done with my hot chocolate though. Really, I give this like a 10. I'm really
I would
happy with
too.
Pretty
It's
this.
very
good.
good.
This is a 10, like 10
But it
out of
is a
10.
lot of dairy.
But like I feel like I'm gonna have a stomach ache later, probably. But it's really good. And I'm glad we didn't make it at like 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so Professor, let's start over. I have a few friends that are starting to the process of becoming authors. One would say they already are authors. One would say they're on their journey to becoming an author. So whichever way you want to look at it. But they have ideas for stories and they're looking to get them written finally and start publishing in the new year. For new people, where should they start? So you meet someone, right? And they have a new idea for a story, or they've had an idea for a story for a while. What do they do next?
So you mean just if they have the idea and they haven't even tried to, they're just like, how do I write a book? What do I do? Okay, I've actually, well, I've helped some people in that situation because it's, I mean, there's different problems. The obvious one that you have to be able to get over if you're going to be a writer is how to actually write a book.
Hmm.
Because yeah, many people have an idea to write a book, but the discipline to show up, however many times you have to sit in front of your computer and put those words down,
Hmm.
and that's its own process. I think a lot of people can get to the first chapter or two maybe, and then that's it.
Hmm.
And so it's sort of like, how do you continue? Getting through a book is its own thing. You can get the first couple chapters in, but once you get past that, it's like, how do you get to the end? And there's
Hmm.
many different ways some writers have figured out to help them get to the end of the book.
Hmm.
Sometimes there's ways you can just force yourself. You could put a pace, like you could set a certain, I'm going to write 2,000 words a day or 1,000, whatever. And then
Hmm.
if you're trying to write 80,000 word novel, 80 days you're done. But
Hmm.
so that's its own thing.
Yeah.
Then there's this other problem: if you get the book done, and now is it any good for publication? Like you can
Yes.
force words out,
Yes.
and with no idea what you're writing. So, I mean, my advice to writers is always, if you can afford it, to try
Hmm.
and get an editor, an editing team, even
Hmm.
involved with your writing process. Like in some of the work I do with writers, who I
Hmm.
think they really are saying this is how it should be for everyone when I'm working
Yeah.
with them, and I help them actually write from that process, because
Hmm.
sometimes if you don't know your market, if you don't know who your reader is, and you don't know exactly what story you're trying to tell, the words you get down on the page could go off, like the train goes in a completely different direction, and it goes
Yeah.
off to a yard that doesn't exist. You're
Yes.
trying to go to Toronto or whatever, some city, and you ended up on some planet that's nowhere, and you're like, where does my book fit now? What do I do?
Yes.
And then it's basically you have to start all over again. So
Hmm.
but sometimes every writer is different. There's plotters and there's pantsers. So plotters,
Hmm.
they work it all out and then they write the story.
Hmm.
Pantsers go by the seat of their pants. They completely make it up, and it's
Hmm.
not down to your style. So for some writers, they have to get that draft down that just got the
Hmm.
story out, and that's when for them it's like good to go to an editor and say, okay, I'm going to
Hmm.
completely gut this, rewrite it. We're going to figure out what the story is, but let's take the look at this manuscript that came
Hmm.
out. What is my story? And then they
Yeah.
go from there. So it's sort of down to the writer. But I mean, you have to get the book out, and you
Hmm.
also have to kind of at the same time, as best as you can, know who your audience is, what the market
Hmm.
is the book you're writing part of an existing genre? Like if there was a bookstore and you imagined your book sitting among some of those books there, where does it fit? How does it add to the
Hmm.
conversation?
Yeah.
Like that's a good way to sometimes think about it, and you
Hmm.
have to kind of balance both those things.
Yeah.
And so that's because if you're writing a book, if you just want to do it for a hobby, then
Hmm.
that's not really that important about the reader. You could just
Yeah.
you wrote the book, it was fun. But if you
Hmm.
are wanting to connect it to readers, and I think a lot of writers want to do that,
Hmm.
or they want a career, they want to actually be a career writer,
Yeah.
and then you have to learn the market part, and then the whole how do I get published, and like what
Yeah.
is the submission process? How does this book get in front of the readers I want? And that's a
Yeah.
whole the piece of the puzzle. So there's so much. Like if you want to be
Yeah.
a writer, I don't know. Just maybe ask, should I be an electrician instead, or a plumber, or maybe I don't want to be a writer. But if you're
You'd
like,
probably make more money that
yeah,
way.
you would. But if you're sitting there thinking, even if I was an electrician, I'd be staying up all night writing books. Well, then yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. You just know it because,
Yeah.
as you say, with the writer, you just do it because you love it. You're not thinking
Yeah.
about the money.
Yeah.
So the money side is, of course, hey, I'd love to make a living on this so I could just write and do nothing else.
Yes.
But that's kind of like I'd like to also get $1 million lottery ticket, and good. So of course I'd
Yeah.
love that. I wouldn't have to do things
Yes.
like
Yes, and much like the lottery, though, like we can't win if we don't play, and you
That's
can't
right. Yep.
possibly become a millionaire off of your book if you
Yeah,
don't write the book.
that's right.
So you gotta
Yeah.
try. My husband said that the other day. He's like, "Why have we not won the lottery?" I'm like, "Because we don't play the lottery." Like I can't remember the last time we bought a ticket because I think we're kind of like you got the last time we bought one was one of the really big, 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 big ones,
Yeah.
whichever one that was.
Oh yeah.
But that's really the only time that we even try. And that's not to say I wouldn't take like a cool 500,000 because like if I won $100,000, I'd be pretty happy. But I just
Yeah.
don't think about it. You know what I mean? I don't really consider it. But
Yeah, and like really, so yeah, we do the same. Like we'll buy a lottery ticket if it hits a certain level, and here
yeah.
in Canada, it's lower than in your country.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if it hits like 50 million, that's like, oh, you better buy a ticket.
Oh, wow.
Whereas I know it's much higher in your
Yeah, it's
country.
pretty high. Yeah.
Um, yeah, but it's kind of silly because your chances of winning 50 million are exactly the same as your chances of winning
Yeah.
100,000.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely true. Yeah, totally true. I don't know the most that I've ever won on a lottery ticket. I can't, it was only like probably I think 500 once. And then
Ah,
my sister-in-law won 20,000 one time.
nice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
off of a $2 ticket.
I think my highest is $20.
Yeah.
Nice.
I won that. There was for it must have been some anniversary of like the lottery company in Canada
Hmm.
or something
Hmm.
because it was like these tickets that were like a guaranteed winner, and like
Oh,
if you didn't win cash, you won another ticket. And so
uh-huh.
like I kept winning ticket after ticket after ticket, and eventually I
Uh-huh.
won $20 a couple times.
That's pretty cool.
But so that's the most. But we have a friend who I don't know if he still does this, but he'd go and play like blackjack at the
Hmm.
casino, and he'd just
Hmm.
walk out with like $800. Like it was
Wow.
semi-regular. Like we'd
Yeah.
see him and he'd be like, oh yeah, I just went to the casino the other day, $1,200. casino the other day, $400.
Yeah, and I'm not much of a gambler either because one time I went to a casino like before a concert or something because it was like we have the Hard Rock cafes here, the Hard Rock casinos.
Been
And then
once.
so like before the concerts are there, there's like a little casino there. But it's like I had like $20 and I'm like, this is the most I'm willing to spend. And like obviously it didn't make anything back. But like once my mom went and she did the same thing. She was like, I'm only gonna spend $20. And I think she made a couple thousand. I think she
Oh,
came back
nice.
with a few thousand, which if you can do that, it's great. But like I could see like the machines were calling me back. Like they were
Yes.
like, come on, just like a couple more. So I have to stay away from that because I could see myself falling into it. Because it's also fun. Like, did you do the thing where you pull the ka-ching, ka-ching, where you pull the bar?
No, I just did the buttons.
Oh, John, have you ever pulled the whooshing
Oh
thing?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I've been to Vegas. I'm
Oh, yeah.
bringing back Vegas memories
Oh, yeah.
when I was younger. Yeah.
Yeah, I like those. I think they're super fun. And I'm doing this thing with my hand, like where you pull the lever down, and I'm assuming people know what I mean when I say ka-ching, ka-ching, but that's what I'm thinking of. Okay, so back to writing. So how do you know if this story idea that you've been holding on to for all these years, how do you know if it's any good? Do you wait
Well,
until you get the whole thing out and then tell somebody, or should you tell somebody before you start writing
well,
it?
it's kind of funny because as you're talking all about the pulling the for the slot
Mhm.
machines and everything, I'm just thinking, oh, this is how it feels every time I have a new story idea. Like, I have to write
Ka-ching.
this book, but it's like it's gonna do it this time. Just one more. This is it. This is the big
That's
one. And
true.
then it's you don't, and then you have to write it. You don't
Mhm.
know until you write it and then publish
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Or try to, depending on which path you're taking, try to publish because sometimes people, depending on what they're doing, they may try and rely on acceptance with a certain selection of publishers or whatever. And if
Hmm.
there's a no, then it's like, okay, it's just abandoned and I write something else, but whatever the
Yeah.
case, you have to write it. And no, unfortunately, this is what makes writing very hard, is
Yeah.
that you it's this balance between what you're passionate about telling, because you need to have a
Hmm.
passion in the story you're telling, and
Hmm.
then this is the lottery part where it's like you have no idea what the zeitgeist, because it is down to some kind of like, I don't know, phenomenon, social trend that
Hmm.
happens to
Yeah.
be taking off, and you happen to pick
Yeah.
the story you were so excited to write happens to fit there.
Yeah.
And, even the publishers, like the big publishers who have all the market analysts and they're making those big decisions, they
Hmm.
don't know the answer to that question.
Oh, yeah.
They're making the most educated guesses
Hmm.
possible because they
Hmm.
pumped all their money into bringing that level of expert in to
Hmm.
analyze all this, but they're still guessing. And
Yeah. And
for the
that's why
ones
books bomb sometimes.
yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so what you're banking on is not, will those marketing editors at the big publishers take this on and pay me money. What you're banking on is, will, when the book is actually published, will it sell? Will it be one of those ones that they're hoping appears? And
Hmm.
you don't know that. So
No. Yeah.
you know and I feel like a lot of publishing is a bit of like the winners write history, like that saying,
Hmm.
because you will, some like Writer's Digest is an interest that I always find it very insightful just to read some of the stories of how writers break in, and yet in the
Hmm.
back of my mind as I'm reading, I'm thinking like, here is the 0.1% who made it, telling their
Hmm.
story as though, do what I did and you'll get in.
Yeah.
uh, and it just, to me,
It's
it's
not
just they're
true.
not
Yeah.
recognizing at all that luck, like they're the lottery winners and they're being told whatever you did, it must have worked. It's like, no,
Yeah.
you happen to win the lottery. And
Yeah.
the 99.9% of other writers, they are not featured in that magazine. So we
Yeah.
don't, yeah, so and I think this is a tough reality that a lot of new writers have to kind of wrap their head around. And I see that sort of process of disillusionment that can set in. And
Hmm.
what happens is they learn at that point, am I writing because I love this and I'm passionate
Hmm.
about it? Or did I
Hmm.
go into this thinking, it's like I follow what Writer's Digest said and I'll make it.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
start to realize that I guess that formula doesn't work. And so like, yeah, and I think when I look at a lot of writers who are still writing, they've been doing it for 10, 20 years, they're not rich, but they're still writing stories because they love it.
Because I
Uh,
love it. Yeah.
so I mean, I think that's just it. There's no guarantee at all. But there is wisdom. You can learn a lot about
Mhm.
how to best hone your story. And I think what writers can do is put themselves in a different category than those who refuse to learn and just
Mhm.
put out whatever, and like who cares about anything, like, so I don't want to give self-publishing a bad name, because there are many
Mhm.
great self-publishers who really do their
Mhm.
diligence, but it
Mhm.
is, unfortunately, it's something that you can just decide, screw them all, they don't know what they're talking about. I'm putting this out, I'm going to run it through Grammarly, and I'm going to
Yeah.
put this cover together in Photoshop that's, I don't know, based on a picture from my photo album or something, and there
Yeah.
you, and I'm done. There you go.
Yeah.
There's nothing stopping people from doing that. Uh,
Yeah.
so, like, uh,
Yeah.
yeah, at
You
the end,
still need an editor. I still just
you
think that
should.
everyone
Yeah.
needs an editor. I think that
Yeah.
even if you're self-publishing, like you need to invest in an editor. And
Yeah.
you cannot be your own editor.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
really do not think you can. I just don't,
That's right.
I don't know. If somebody is, and we know someone that is like their own editor and
Yeah.
their own publisher and they do everything by themselves, like I want to see that book. I want to read it. I wouldn't like say it out loud what I thought of it, but I'm just curious
Yeah.
if that's possible because I just don't think you can be impartial towards your own work at first glance. Like of course like afterwards you can look at it after it's been edited and find ways to make it better. But I think that initial like I think this is perfect as is. Like I think we're all in for a shock as soon as you pass your manuscripts over the first time because
Yeah.
the editor's like, "Yeah, no.
Mhm.
This is not perfect." And depending on, what kind of an editor you have, like you have an editor that says, hey, you need to fix just these things, and here's how we can fix it. Or you have one that says, start over because this is terrible.
Yeah.
But like, because I know that for me, and I think I talked about this on maybe the first episode of the podcast, but with my first book with Cooper, Luke was not the main character. But I had set it up when I had written it that when Craig read it that first time, he was like, wow, you've done a really good job here. I'm really attached to your main character already after just a few pages. Like, I feel like I understand him and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, Luke seems blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh shit. Like I was like, oh my God. So I inadvertently made a secondary character the main character because I was telling
Yeah.
the story from his POV,
Yeah.
like as soon as the story started. And like that's like a big no-no. Like the secondary character shouldn't be the first person whose POV you're in. I think that's a rule, no? Or is that
I'd
not
say
really?
that's pretty good. All rules can be bent
Yes.
successfully,
There's
but
a
that's a
Yeah.
reason
pretty
for it.
solid
Yeah.
rule.
Yeah. So, and I didn't know that, but it was funny because I knew I did a good job. And then when I saw that you said, yeah, Luke is a really great, I was like, Luke is a what? I was like, oh no, he's not the main character. So I knew I needed to change some stuff. But I think those are things that new writers don't know. Like, I think there's a lot of POV rules that we don't know going
Mhm.
in. And it's hard to find like a good book. Craig and I were talking about this earlier. It's hard to find like a good book that explains these things properly to a new writer. So it's hard. And then people get advice from the wrong people. So I don't know where the best place is for people to go, John, that are starting out, like for rules on POV and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I keep being told by various people that I should write this book called How to Edit a Book.
I
So
think you should.
maybe this is the place where people are going to have to go someday, because
Yeah.
it is true. It is so hard to find one place
Hmm.
to, and like the most writers who want to learn about this, there are lots and lots of books that have been written. So there's a nice list of maybe 200 of them that are like the real popular ones. You if you consult various writing groups and forums and stuff, you'll see certain books always appear there. I actually have
Hmm.
this list. It's about 200 books long, and I'd say those are like the cornerstones. If you read those, you probably know everything that every editor across every editor writer kind of knows as their go-to of what are the rules.
Hmm.
And anyone you talk to, you'll be like, oh, I see they've read these books and they're getting
Yeah.
their stuff from here.
Yeah.
So that's really the thing to do if you want to educate yourself. It's very
Yeah.
doable. You just kind of do a really thorough Google search,
Yeah.
top craft books. And if you go through, you'll come across certain groups, reliable groups that have listed their stuff. Even Goodreads has that, and look for
Yeah.
overlaps. It's not
Yeah.
that hard to do, but I mean, it would be nice if it was all in one place.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think most of those writing books were written by people who have the same intention as me. It's like, I got all this knowledge and stuff I've learned from various places,
Yeah.
and people keep asking me, so here's my brain in a book, and there you go. And so, but there's plenty of great books that have already done that.
Yeah.
And I would say I mean, I'm not going to get into the list here.
Yeah. No, yeah, no, no,
Long, right? But yeah, I mean, you consult
Yeah.
those books and you'll learn a lot. But of
Yeah.
course, if you have a good editor, and this again comes down to budget, like some people, if they can afford to have the editor who works alongside them, and like for me, I go in Zoom meetings, so I'm able to talk and teach
Yeah.
in person. And the best way to learn all this stuff is like take your book or the thing you're writing and your own writing, and treat it like it's like if you went and took a writing workshop. Like, why would you pick apart some other great work of literature and say, what did they do here? It's like, you didn't write that book. The best learning is to take your book and have the editor put that through the ringer, and then have you learn. And like, so when they're fixing POV, or if they're coming across a pacing issue or whatever, like this is what I find comes up, like the lessons come across because I'm explaining why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'll stop and say, do you know the difference between passive and active voice here?
Yes.
I'll take a look at what I did, and you're able to. So I mean, if you have a really good editor who likes to teach, and you can do the one-on-one stuff, that really is a great way to actually learn using your own writing.
Yeah.
Because yeah, like otherwise all the books you're going to read are just like point of view and how to
Yeah.
do various things, and you might not even realize that you're not getting a certain concept.
What do you think that the biggest thing is that you see from brand new writers that you end up having to coach them on? What do you think the number one thing is? Is it POV? Is it pacing? Is it voice? Like what, or is it like sticking to the plot? What do you feel like the most common problem is?
That's a very tough question, because the one thing I do notice is that every writer is different. So
Yeah.
for me, the number one thing that I find, well, it's like I used to be a math tutor, and I always would adapt to the student. My goal is to figure out how their mind is working, like how is their thinking process. Usually there was a gap somewhere. It could be grade 5 where that one teacher introduced something and they're just like, oh my God, I can't,
Yeah.
and then that's the hole. And I find that. And then I help them get over it. So with every writer, I find it's the same thing. I have to figure out
Different.
how are they processing stuff. And so I've come across, everyone is different.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, sure, pacing is almost always a problem. It's always something that works in. I don't know if I would say it's a beginning writer thing as much as it is. It's maybe if a writer hasn't been exposed a lot to editing, where they've had to have the pacing worked on quite a lot, and understand, like, the story, every single line has to move the story forward. And you develop an intuition for, if even like half a sentence, just nope, that was not needed here. And or whatever, like you have a paragraph and it just feels like it died. Well, why? What happened? Like what was needed in there? And that's painful, because if you wrote like 800-900 paragraphs, you gotta go through everyone like that. Like, no
True.
wonder
Yeah.
writers don't want to go through their edits. But
No.
so it's like I'd say it's, maybe more generally, it's that instinct to thoroughly unturn every stone, and it's
Yeah.
sentence by sentence. And I
Yeah.
think that for the most part, I'll notice working with newer writers, they're scared to do that. It just
Yeah.
is not something they would think to do on their own. And that's what I love about my process when I work with writers, because we do it together and we have a bit of fun on the way. And then,
Yeah.
when you get a couple chapters in, they're like, oh, this is cool. Like, this is what I
Yeah.
want writing to be,
Yeah.
but you need to sort of see that there can be a fun to it.
Yeah.
And you really have to slow down, because you're used to writing at the speed of get the words on the page. But when you
Yeah.
go back and sweat them all, like think through and resolve all the problems.
Mhm.
It's a much slower pace, so I
Mhm.
think it's like just learning to develop that. But I think any writer can get there, and once you internalize it, then your
Mhm.
writing will be so much stronger because
Yeah.
you learn how to do it and anticipate your editor. So,
Hmm.
hmm.
Yeah. Well, that's all good. I mean, it's all a learning process. And I think that's probably the most important thing is that if you're going to be a writer, you have to accept that you're going to constantly be learning. Like
Yeah.
you're going to always learn and you haven't, I don't know, is there a writer who think that knows everything?
I'm sure there's writers who think they know everything. I may have at times over, like seen a few of those in action. I won't name names
What?
or
Craig, you have any questions? I have one if you don't have
Um,
one.
I don't know about you two, but all that dairy that we warmed up. So we just drank a giant cup of hot milk, which
Yeah.
makes you sleepy.
You sleepy?
Um, yeah, so I'm
Okay.
having a little trouble
I can
following. I
ask
do
another
have a
question.
question. I do have a question, actually.
Okay.
But because I'm having trouble following, I don't know if this was talked about. So we'll
no.
see. But we talk about, you've been talking about like getting advice from editors or from online sources. How do you know if someone's giving you bad advice or the wrong advice?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
that's a good one.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's hard because there's a lot of things that seem really legitimate, and there's the obvious things. Like I guess a good way to, if you can get somebody to give you some sample edits, like don't do the whole thing, but sometimes people ask for a chapter or two. Um, and it just lets you get a sense of what kind of editing work they do, like how do they communicate the issues to you. So does it, you'll be able to tell really, because sometimes like a lot of people who will be editors are also writers, and on the side they're freelancing because they're trying to supplement their income, and
Hmm.
editing is a great way to add some revenue if you're trying to
Hmm.
make it as a writer, and book
Hmm.
sales aren't paying all the bills, so you
Yeah.
can edit. And sometimes with writers who hang their shingle as an editor, they might not be good editors, they might be good writers, and you'll
Hmm.
feel like this is another writer trying to write my story for me.
Hmm.
Now it's a tricky one because when I edit, I do a lot of inline suggestions that can
Hmm.
appear like me writing the story for someone, but this is the
Hmm.
difference. When an editor is very skilled, they do the
Hmm.
Vulcan mind meld thing. So it's, you have the ability to
Hmm.
pull the words down that the writer is like, that is exactly what I wanted to say, but I
Hmm.
know how to say it.
Yeah.
You got it. How did you do that? And
Yeah.
so I find that's basically again and again, I get that. And if you can do that, that's great. That's what that's why the editor can and writer, like those two, they're like two sides of a coin. And a really good
Hmm.
editor is good at working with writing. But the big difference, like when I do that, I'm not trying to tell my story.
Yeah.
I'm writing that story, and I'm saying, what is this writer trying to do? Like I try to
Hmm.
understand their voice. I'm
Hmm.
just trying to get to know them, and I'm trying to help them find their words. Uh,
Yeah.
and that's a big difference. But you'll know, because I've seen where someone comes in offering to do some edits, and it's basically like if you were in a writing group and another fellow writer hijacked your book, and you're like, they're suddenly changing your character's dialogue, saying like, I
Hmm.
don't really like this character, I think I'd prefer them like
Yeah.
this. And I'm like, really? Like so
Yeah.
now suddenly it's your character. You're not
Yeah.
trying to help the writer, saying, I know what you're trying to say here, this was a little confusing or something, like they're not trying to
Yeah. That's a
get in
difference.
and
Yeah.
work with your character. So you can spot stuff like that. Yeah, but it's hard. Like you have to really use your discernment, and kind of like writing that perfect book. Well, finding a good editor can be
Hmm.
really tough. Like you
Yeah.
you sometimes you find out you have the world's best editor when you just realize, wow, I'm so lucky. This editor is great, because there's so many other editors I could have ended up with who,
Hmm.
just did a glorified proofread, or the
Hmm.
very, yeah. So like you can either get the heavy person that's hijacking your book, like another writer trying to take over,
Hmm.
or you can get the minimal editor who does like a glorified proofread. So, you know, maybe they fix some typos or, you know, just things where you're almost sitting there thinking, like, did they even read this? Did they?
Yeah, it's like when people are just pretending they're paying attention, they're not even paying
Yeah,
attention.
that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
like
sort
that.
of like, or, you know, maybe they did read it, but they just don't have the instinct to comment. And because there are people who will gladly read your book and anything important they'll chime in on, but if they don't have an editor's instinct, they're basically a reader being paid to read your book. And of course, any
Yeah.
person who is being paid to read a book, if they spot typos or they're confused somewhere, of course they're gonna say that. But an editor thinks deeper, like they are thinking about plot, character arc, they're thinking about, they know all the rules of different narration, different point of view, pacing and proportioning. Those are two big editing issues. Effectiveness of language. There's this whole, you've got the encyclopedia in your brain that can open to whatever page it needs to, and it's just there when you're going through. And that's what you want in an editor.
Yeah.
I think sometimes the best way to find a good editor is to ask your writer friends if they have a really good editor and why. And then, you know, you could maybe, if you can find some writers who really recommend them, that can sometimes help. But of course, you know, not that I want to be soliciting on the podcast, but you know, an editor right here. So there you
That's true. Yes,
There's
you
another way to
do.
find a good editor. Just email me.
That's right. No, that's absolutely right. And but yeah, I think that that's really good advice too, to ask other writers who they've used that they've liked. That's a good idea to stay within the community and do it that way. Because I think you could definitely end up with an editor, like you said, you know, that could just hijack the manuscript, or one
Yep.
that does the opposite, that really doesn't pay attention, you know. I and just goes through it, and maybe just one that just does a spell check or just runs it
Yep.
through, like you said earlier, just runs it through Grammarly and is like, here you go, edited, here you go. So yeah, I think the question that I've been asked the most recently is, like, what happens when you have the idea, but the idea isn't fully formed? So like you may have your main character and the idea, but like they're having difficulty reconnecting with the material after they've already come up with, like, say, the main character and the main character's plot line, but then they can't come up with surrounding characters.
Yeah. So that's sort of where, you know, that in the beginning I mentioned, with there's the getting through the book and then there's what to do with the book in the end. But like, yeah, you're kind of hitting on a middle ground, which is not so much a matter of I can't sit down and get a book together, but it's like I can sort of get the book down, but I'm struggling with certain aspects, like to make it fully fleshed out. And actually, that is where an editor can really help. So I've actually had a few people submit books in this shape, like for the private editing work that I do, and we do with, like, me or other editors on the team. And so it's somebody who wrote a draft, got it through, and they know it's not there, but they just don't know that, like, it's like, this is as done as I can make it. I know it's missing various stuff, but I don't know. I need an editor to give me some input. So we'll do what's called like a pre-editorial assessment. So it's kind of like, it's the editorial assessment would be, the book is done, it's good, ready to go to edits. Let's read it and give it an analysis of what's got to get worked on. And so one thing about this is we're acknowledging that we're not expecting it to be a complete book. We might be aware of what, like, as much information we have at the start. That's good to know. If they're aware, I've been told I need more, I don't know, the romance has to be steamier or something like that, or it has to be more believable, or the characters don't express their emotions, whatever input maybe they're getting from people and they want some input. We'll factor that in. But then we try to give them some advice on, okay, here's the story as it's coming together, and this is what's working well. And to be a complete book, you would need to do this. And then we can give some of those suggestions, and sometimes that can help. But it kind of comes back to when I was mentioning that sometimes writers will, at the get-go, right with the idea, they'll get the editor to work with them. And
Mhm.
that is a way to avoid falling into that trouble, because the editor has the instinct for knowing what a full plot arc is. And also
Yeah.
ahead of time, they'll have an idea of your genre. So what are the expectations and tropes? So what
Mhm.
boxes do you have to sort of make sure you tick to have, when you reach the end, you've hit all those things and the reader's expectations are met.
Mhm.
So they'll also be good at tracking character development.
Mhm.
These like Chekhov guns, like you put a gun on the mantle in scene 1, you better use it in scene 3. And there's a lot
Yeah.
of like guns on the mantles that just don't get fired.
Yeah.
And or vice versa. If something conveniently shows up and you're like, okay, that's good. That's good. We're gonna resolve this fight scene here with some twist or whatever,
Mhm.
yeah, some brilliant twist. And it's like, okay, then I got to go back into like the first third, and we're gonna work it in so it didn't come out of nowhere. And yeah, the
Mhm.
editor, that's their job, is to track all that stuff, and then you can kind of balance and make sure
Yeah.
things are fully fleshed out. So if you're partly writing and going to an editor, it's really going to be the same drill, like where you would work to get basically try and tell your story in a synopsis form. And that is a really good way to get a sense of the overall shape and what's missing and what you need to
Yeah.
develop in, and then go and make a plan for, okay, so now with this story summarized as this is the awesome book that I wanted to write, what do I have to do to the manuscript to fulfill it? And then you
Mhm.
go in that way. And so, and an editor could either help you right from the beginning, and I think that's the better way to do it. But
Mhm.
if you don't want to, if you want to go later on and sort of say, "Help me, I'm stuck,"
Yeah.
they would be the same. They would just come and do the same thing. Or at least a good editor would do that. Not all editors would. Some editors would just say, "Okay, I'll edit a chapter or two, and I'll give you some input." But my preference, I mean, I've tried different things, and I've also seen many approaches to this. I just think there's no way to go but to try and get your story in a synopsis form and work with
Yeah.
that,
Hmm.
because it's the way you see the bigger picture of the plot and the character arcs, and also
Mhm.
deeper things like theme, because you're seeing it in a 5-page span. It's hard
Yeah.
to see that in a 300-page manuscript with, if
Yeah.
you're attached to various things, and you just can't imagine throwing away that scene of
Yes.
beautiful dialogue
Yes.
because you don't see that it in the big picture it didn't fit anywhere. Uh, so I think that working with an editor on the synopsis level like that's
Yeah.
for helping
And
you in
I think that
whatever.
I feel bad for because I've had a few conversations with people who are so afraid to have an editor look at their book before it
Mm,
gets approved, like because they're, trying to submit to agents. And I had someone that was like, well, if I let another editor do it, they could
mm,
mess it up, or then an agent's not going to work with me because they're already edited. And I'm like, okay, both of those things you really shouldn't probably worry about because like
yeah,
it is true that it doesn't technically need to be edited before you
yeah,
submit it because if,
yeah,
the publishing house has their own team of editors. But when we're talking about like a new writer, like there's different types of edits, like we talked about one of
yeah.
the other podcasts. So we're not talking like a full edit all the way through. What would that be called, John, when you like for a new writer to come and look for help with their manuscript without doing like a full like line by line edit? What would that be called?
Well, yeah. So we sometimes have people pay for just a like an editorial assessment. So
Yeah.
pre-editorial is if you come and it's not done, but you need help knowing what to finish. And the
Hmm.
editorial assessment is basically where we give it a read, and we give you some advice on what bigger picture
Hmm.
things you have to work on without
Hmm.
going line by line into the manuscript. So
Hmm.
that's a good way to get an overview of the bigger
Hmm.
issues you have to
Is
work on.
that, oh, I'm sorry. Is that like a one price service to do something like that for an
Yeah, we
editor?
have
Oh,
a
okay.
so we go we
I
have
was
a
just curious if
monthly.
it was by line or word or whatever.
Yeah, we go by the word count. I have
Hmm.
to look at the prices again.
Yeah,
They're
no, that's
on our
okay.
website.
Yeah.
But we've always have for all our services, it's a per word.
Mm-hmm.
rate, and that is a maximum. And what we
Mm-hmm.
do is we track the hours, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes if something is very little to do and we get through it faster and the hours come out to less than the word count, then it lets us give a bit of a discount. But
I got you.
yeah, the dollar per word rate is it's pretty high. Like if you work it out to
Yeah.
what your word count is, pretty high, and
Yeah.
it just kind of covers the like it's based on having done many of these, and I have an average sense of like what
Yeah.
worst case scenarios, and
Mm-hmm.
it just sometimes people like knowing before they go in, it's not they're not going to get sticker shocked and find that took 83 hours and
Yeah.
God, that's 5 times more than I thought I was going to pay.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
it just gives people that reassurance. So,
Yeah.
like the editorial assessment would be the service that would be good for that if they just want some input. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, like, but that said, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions about what it means to have an editor look at your work. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the reality is, I think a lot of times budget is part of it, because
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of people still in that stage of enchantment with being published. They're thinking that, I shouldn't have to spend a cent. This will go out there and get published, and then the editor will work on it, and I'm the one getting paid, and they're in that enchantment stage, which is really cute. It's sort of, I see a lot of it, but the reality is you go and submit your book to the big publishers, and unless it's top notch, the editors are going to look at it and say, I am not working on this, forget it.
Yeah.
So as it just is a reality that unless you're lucky, you're that lottery winner,
Mm-hmm.
you're probably going to find you'll go to submit your book and you're going to get crickets. You're going to get like form rejection, and you won't know why. And probably the reason is the editors are looking at it saying, I can't work on this.
Yeah.
There's all these basically beginner things that this person should have figured out. And
Mm-hmm.
what happens is a lot of times writers in that situation eventually realize, okay, I need to go find an editor. Actually, a lot of people who I work with they pass the enchantment stage and they're coming into the disillusionment, frustration stage. And it's like, okay, like I don't know what's not working here. And,
Yeah.
and then finally realizing that unfortunately to improve as a writer, you kind of have to be willing to pay some money to
Yeah.
get a good editor to help you brush up, like get yourself that stage. And I think actually a lot of agents and editors at the big, like sort of in that the those big houses where they put
Mm-hmm.
bookstores in every
Mm-hmm.
books in every bookstore, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're I've listened to various interviews and different podcast talks, and it's pretty unanimous that they're all saying, yeah, the reality is we expect any writer submitting to us has already has editor or
Mm-hmm.
editors, and they have a
Mm-hmm.
whole assembly line of stuff,
Yeah.
because yeah, we aren't paid to do that, which to me is,
Yeah.
I don't,
Which
whatever, I'm not
it's
going
pretty
to
wild.
my
It's
thought on
pretty
that, but
wild though.
it's how
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they
Yeah.
are going to edit for you, but it's going to be very general and expecting you, like it's sort of like they expect you're the PhD student in their final year, and they can wave their hand and you get everything. They don't want to. And so if you're at, I don't know, first year university level learning stuff, that they expect you to get to that PhD level on your own.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's tough. Like basically when it's all coming down to it, it's tough. It's a
It
really
is tough.
thing.
Yeah. It
So
is tough. It feels like it's easy and it's not that easy.
it's
Like
not.
it's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is hard. Because I've had people say that before. Not about my writing or to me, like, to me, but I've had people say it in conversation that I don't know why writers complain so much when it's just easy. You're just telling a story. And I'm like, it's not that easy. You're not just telling a story. Like it's quite hard to put a story together that's
Yeah.
cohesive and that
Yeah.
holds people's attention, that is original, that is entertaining. And then, like you said, with the tropes, like it's also meeting reader expectation too, which is a whole different thing. you know, like meeting reader expectation is really important if you want your book to succeed, because sure, you might have friends and family that buy it because they want to support you, but the bigger overall audience, like if you're not appealing to them, then it's not gonna, you know, if you're really trying to make your book go big, you have to go beyond your family and friends who are probably not going to tell you the truth about
Yeah.
your book anyway. Although I do know some people who have family that would definitely tell them the truth. But for the most part, your friends don't want to hurt your feelings. So I don't know. I agree with you. I think an editor early on is super important. But yeah, I think this was all pretty good starting advice. I don't think I have that many more questions. Well, I mean, I have a ton of questions, but you know, not a ton of time. So I don't know what else other advice we would give to a new writer. I'm not really sure. I think everything that you said was really good. Knowing the market and stuff like that. And I don't know, just being grounded, I think is really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and this is like one of those topics that could branch out into all kinds of
Yeah.
follow-up topics. Like
Yeah, for
I think
sure.
what you're seeing is like we've talked about a lot already.
Yeah.
It just feels like there's so much more to say
But
on
there's
it
so
because
much more. Yeah.
each
Well,
is its own
yeah.
topic. Yeah.
Yeah, could you imagine like what? Did we just tell somebody how to become an author in an hour? No. Like
No,
we just gave them like a tiny bit of advice. But
maybe you're
yeah,
gonna get requests for like saying, "Hey, kid, I wanted to know more about this. Thanks, I got
hey,
this, but now I want to know more
I
about
hope
this."
that we do actually. I love when people ask
Yeah,
questions. It makes me
yeah.
happy. I told Craig it was when I had like these couple people reaching out to me, I thought that was like the coolest thing. I love people asking for advice. I love giving advice.
Like for the private clients I work with, I even offer a free meet and greet Zoom session. Like it can run an hour, it could even be longer, but
Yeah.
it's just to talk because in this case I'm going to be hiring or someone will be hiring me to work for in 90-minute Zoom sessions for
Yeah.
however long, and I want to make sure they like me and they understand the process and they get excited about it, and usually I find that meet and greet. Well, I have 100% success rate so far. I mean, I don't have thousands of clients or anything. So far, I have not had somebody say, "Oh, I don't like this. I don't want to do it." It's
Yeah.
usually kind of like they're hooked at that
Yeah.
point. Oh, but and we will sometimes like. Well, one of the recent ones that became my client originally just wanted a sample chapter. So
Hmm.
we're okay with that. I mean, in this case, I looked at the manuscript and I immediately said, this is sample chapter isn't going to be the best way to help this writer. I knew we
Hmm.
needed to right away get to the synopsis and
Hmm.
needed to do some one-on-one with me. So I just
Yeah.
threw it out there saying that, like I know you wanted a chapter, but and when I assessed and took a look, this is my advice. And I said,
Yeah.
I know with this the kind of thing that if you don't have the budget for it, you're not going to go this way. But my opinion, if I want to help you, this is the service that is going to
Yeah.
help you. And
Yeah.
that ended up working. But I mean, it's possible. And I have been in a situation where people say, yeah, I don't have the money for that. I just want a basic edit. Can you do this? And then, of course, we adapt to it. Uh,
Yeah. But
but
like a sample chapter exists. That's a
yeah,
thing.
well, it's not something that we um like. I don't want to get into like everyone can do it, but if
Yeah.
sometimes someone is just not sure,
Yeah.
and they just want to get a sense of, will this be a fit before
Hmm.
they go, and that's fair because sometimes people get they go and hire an editor and then they pay all this money and they got the edits, and now
Hmm.
you have to pay the editor because they did all that work, but you're
Hmm.
not happy with the edits. And so the
Yeah.
sample chapter just gets them a sense of like, what's this person's style like? And
Hmm.
we sometimes too will have people just pay for partials. So like say take
Hmm.
3 chapters, and
Hmm.
that's a bit of the mid, so it's not free, but
Hmm.
it's a couple chapters that's not going to break the bank, but it gives them enough to see like, is this any good? And then, maybe if it's not something they want to follow up on,
Hmm.
then at least they can take those edits and apply them. So
Yeah.
it's like but they didn't go and spend whatever $2,000 to have
Hmm.
this big manuscript done thoroughly and not know whether they're going to get the full
Yeah.
quality. So yeah, so I do see that, and I think my preference would be that like the people who are willing to pay for a partial, like a couple
Mhm.
chapters, and
Yeah.
assess that over the free chapter, because
Yeah.
the thing about the free assessment is you don't really get to see that much. Like
Yeah.
sometimes to understand where the editor is going to really bring some things in, it might not be the first chapter.
Yeah.
It might be you'll see it come together in a couple chapters, and yeah, so
Okay.
that's tends to be the best way we
Okay.
that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, everyone can go to the website, which is what, Craig?
Storyperfectediting.com.
Thank you super much for joining us. It's always super fun to have you on, and I'm sure we'll have parts 2 through 10 of your journey, people's journey to becoming a new author, journey to publication. But yeah, if we have any more questions, I'll definitely send them your way, or we'll have you on again and we can go over some
Yeah.
of those. Because yeah, definitely part one of I don't even know the rest of your life, I think you would
Oh yeah, there'll
say.
be FAQ with John.
Yeah,
Just wait until
yeah.
there's enough, and then you pull me back on part
That's right.
FAQ part 4, part 5.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. I really do. We really appreciate it.
Oh, the guest has to give the final thought of the day. So,
That's
John, give us the final thought of the day because I can't be trusted.
no.
Well, my final thought of the day is, yeah, like everything that we've talked about with do you get an editor or not? And wherever you may be at, if you have some resistance to this idea of working with an editor, um, yeah, just take into account what you've heard and here, because I mean, I'm not sharing this, well, being green around the gills. Like I've been around the block with this kind of stuff, and there's a reason why I have some of the advice I have, and it's because the reality is, um, writing and publishing is very hard, and but some of the where I see people at least start to feel empowered and like they understand what they're doing. It's when they finally decided, okay, I'm going to get an editor. I'm going to work with an editor. So yeah, so just think about that. And if you're scared of getting an editor, or you're putting it off or whatever, like I didn't talk about this stuff for nothing. So is it your time to start thinking about getting an editor? And even it can cost money, but it's, if you want to go to university and get a great career, a great degree that sets you for life, I mean, you're going to pay way more than you're paying an editor. So
That's
and in a
true.
way, to be a writer, there is no university or writer school you go to that makes you become a novelist and understand this career. And so your equivalent of that is to get a very good editor who will work with you and basically be your university of being a novelist.
Sweet. Well, that was fun. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks
All
for
Thank
right.
you.
having me on.
Yeah. Well, thanks, John. We will see you next time.
All right. Thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye. Hey, bye. Now it's time for coffee with Callie and Sleepy Craig.
Sleepy, sleepy, sleepy. I really could go for a coffee now after
Yeah,
that.
I
Mhm.
could not. Like, I could not. And I actually only had 2 coffees today. So I think it's funny because it's like the milk hit you and the sugar hit me. Because I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, writing sprints. What can we do? Like, what can we get done within the next hour and a half before we have to go to bed or 2 hours before bedtime? Because I feel like I could do a million things right now. And you're like, oh
Mhm.
my God, where is a pillow and a blanket? And
Yep.
I'm ready for
Yep.
bed.
Accurate. Accurate.
Yes. Um, but we were just, oh, you know what? We probably shouldn't talk about that. We could save that for another episode. But I
Curious.
really did learn a lot from John. So that gave me some things to help some new writers with.
Hmm.
I do find it crazy that it seems like being a writer would be so easy, and it really is
Yeah.
not so easy. Because, yeah, you think like when you're in elementary school, right? Like I came up with an idea and I just write the story down, but you're really working for so many different things. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd say it's like deceptively easy because sure, you can write a story down on a piece of paper. Um, but for it to hold together and for it to engage your reader, that's like an entirely different thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I actually today had a breakthrough on my story that I didn't even
Yes.
know I was waiting for a breakthrough. And
Yeah, you
but it
mentioned.
yeah, but isn't that funny when that happens? Like that you're working on something and you feel like it's just right, and then all of a sudden, boom, and then you're like, oh no, this is right. Has that
Hmm.
happened to you before? I know.
Oh, it's happened more than once. I'm like, oh, if I do this one thing, this
Mhm.
changes my book from way up here to way up
Yeah, it
here.
just elevates it. Yeah. But
Yeah.
I told you today, I felt like it was funny because like my brain was like leaving little breadcrumbs. So like this huge thing that's gonna happen in the story that I hadn't planned for, like somehow like my subconscious already knew it was gonna happen because I've been like setting it up without even realizing I was setting it up. So I don't understand how that happens. That's weird. Like
Yeah.
I don't understand. Because normally, if you're going to introduce some huge plot point or you're going to change something, you need to go backwards and make sure it doesn't come out of nowhere. But like, I've been like leaving little things along the way. I have no idea how. But yeah, it's gonna fit right in there. And yeah, it felt pretty good to do that. So I meant to tell John about that while he was on the podcast, ask him if that had happened to him too. So the next time we have the professor on, we'll have to talk to him about breakthroughs in writing, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, things that you didn't really know that the book needed until you came up with it, I guess. I didn't know. Okay, so we have a lot of baking and cooking to do this
We do.
weekend.
Hmm.
And then our next episode, I do not know what our next episode is because December is such a busy month that we actually had something come up, so we had to postpone our holiday book fair episode, which we were
We did.
bummed about, but we also just it's just too hard. Sometimes you have to know your limits and say that there were so many things happening in
Hmm.
December that it just was not going to be possible to get everybody together and try and make sure the schedules are working. So, but hopefully we can do it again, like maybe in the spring or something, get everyone together
Yeah,
because
that would be nice.
yeah, because it is always nice when we get our some other writers on and they get to talk about their books. But I think that's really it for us,
Hmm.
right? You got
Yeah.
anything else? Yeah?
No,
Yeah,
no.
you're gonna just fall asleep, I think.
Yeah, but next
Yeah.
time I have trouble sleeping, I'm making white hot chocolate.
Maybe it's just the milk, maybe not the
Hmm.
chocolate, probably. I really don't, I'm serious, I'm not tired at all. You could tell. I mean, you've been in Zoom with me when I'm tired. I'm not
Yeah.
tired. I'm ready to go. I'm like, we got hours of work to do. Snap out of it. But yeah, so this was fun. And we will oh wait, you gotta tell people where to follow us.
Yeah, let's see if I manage this when I'm half asleep. So we are on YouTube,
Mm-hmm.
Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
Threads,
Mm-hmm.
Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's it. We're not on Blue Sky, not yet anyway.
TikTok.
And TikTok at Cali Craig Talk, CaliCraigTalk.
Yeah, that's it. We should be on Blue Sky soon. Like you and I are both on Blue Sky.
We should, yeah.
But we should probably put a Cali Craig Talk one on there. But gosh, it's so much work to make a new account.
Mm-hmm.
It really is.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you again next time.
Yeah, thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Mhm. Bye.
Bye 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 bye.
Bye.
Bye bye bye.
It's still making me laugh even though you're half asleep. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, bye. Bye for real this
Bye.
time. Bye.